What's up, everybody? Welcome to Silicon Zombies, where we bring you the best brains from the Bay to beyond. We've got some wonderful folks in the house today, and really excited to be talking about tariffs and also sorts of AI elements as well. So we've got Mercedes Bankson from Loyal VC, and we've got Michael Orlando from ATEL Ventures. So before we go any further, I want to give a quick shout out to our friends at Nicodex. So if you're looking to build a product, or if you need help with design or distribution, go to nicodex.com. That's NECODEX.com. And of course, our friends at Spread. So if you're a content creator and it's difficult to get all the cameras and the distribution, the editing, and all the rest, check out gospread.co. And we'll be sure to include their information in the show notes as well. Well, this is pretty exciting. I know we've done all sorts of cool prep, and we just have been having a wonderful conversation before we're going live here on Zombies Unplugged. So maybe to get things kicked off, Mercedes, would you like to do a short introduction?
So I work mainly between two different groups. So that's the Founder Institute, which is Pre-Seed Accelerator, and Loyal VC, which tends to invest in Founder Institute grads or INSEAD grads around the world.
Well, Mike Orlando, we're for ATEL Ventures, and we've been around since about 77. And we do venture debt for Series A and above companies, industry agnostic, but lately kind of been focusing on deep tech in the autonomous space.
Excellent. Well, I'm really jazzed to kind of dig deeper on both of those and in your respective expertises. But it is kind of interesting how it seems like the half-life of content is like shorter than ever before. You know, we learn about something, and maybe less than a week later, everything's completely changed. However, I think this creates an opportunity to help educate and make the tricky things very fun and simple, almost like a tool for people to be able to use and accomplish their dreams and make money and have fun along the way. One of the things that we just figured out recently, or that we just were shared with on the news, is we have a new pope, right? And I understand this may not feel like it touches technology, but in fact it does. The Pope chose. Did you know that the Pope gets to choose his name? Were you aware of this?
Yes.
Yeah.
I just watched a new movie on this.
Oh, really? Okay. Tell us more.
I don't know the name of the movie.
Okay.
I think it was on Netflix. It's probably one of the top ones for the week.
Yeah.
But it talks about like how they choose the Pope. It's completely fictional, as it turned out near the end. But
you're like, that was so juicy.
it felt very juicy because they spend, like something like 6 weeks, like behind closed doors, like voting, and it felt very political. A lot of pampering, a lot of massaging of the egos, and trying to figure out who is the best person to represent this community.
Yeah. Well, it's fascinating because it's Pope Leo XIV, and he chose that name because of Pope Leo. It was a nod to Pope Leo XIII, which was in the late 1800s, who was the Pope during the first Industrial Revolution, which almost feels like we're in an Industrial Revolution right now, right? Where we've got the free market economy, but also maybe that could go too far. And then, of course, we've got to make sure to have folks feeling like they're contributing and have respect for labor and all the rest. So it feels like the Pope wants to get into that space and maybe have something to say on behalf of the Catholic Church. And yes, he is Catholic. But so I thought that was kind of interesting. And also, we're talking about tokens and tariffs today, but more specifically, tokens, not necessarily within the scope of crypto, but like how artificial intelligence is processed from a data perspective. In fact, Michael, I know you've been doing some research on this here. What did you find, or what was most interesting for you personally when doing prep for Zombies Unplugged here?
Yeah, it was pretty incredible, just kind of looking into just how these kind of models are being created in these tokens that they're purchasing. Whether on OpenAI, you can go in and you can see, right, it's 0.001 to write excerpt of code or to open up to API this or what have you. And I think it's pretty incredible, right? It's kind of like a loop where you can be creating this model, and then that model itself can almost monetize itself. And then these two models now, which is incredible, but they can almost talk to each other and be doing like a full-blown exchange with each other, which is Pretty fascinating. And
are we talking like data or are we talking tool sets? Because I know A2A is different from MC2, MCM. Are we, yeah.
It's more, yes, it's more on the data sets, but it's these tokens back and forth to build more models, right? So they're just continuously evolving. And I guess from that aspect of things, look, and I'm no expert, but I think that we're climbing up the hill. We're not on the precipice of what's going to happen yet, but I think there's a lot of gray area, and the SEC has to figure out how that's all going to look. And I think there's going to be, you got to have your KYC and AMLs locked down like Fort Knox before you start investing big dollars in there. But I think it'll ramp up production of AI when we are in probably, as you're saying, a renaissance of a new time.
Well, I think we're fortunate to have two rock star investors in the house because of the changing dynamic, right? Like they say, maybe you don't care about politics, but politics cares about you. It almost feels like that's becoming more and more of an important element in running a business. Before we jump into the tariffs, I mean, we're kind of having a short discussion prior of whether it's more difficult or less difficult to be a founder than ever before. Mercedes, what's your take?
I think it's definitely easier having been a founder. But I mean, it's just like the speed in which you can do things, right? Like, so when I go and do market research, I go and look at what's on Claude, I go look what's on Llama, I look at what's on ChatGPT, and then, one of them usually comes up with the data being a lot better, and then I make like my best decision. But how would I have done that market research before? Maybe I'd have to hire a marketing person. Like, I don't need that headcount anymore.
So you're kind of triangulating truth between these models.
With AI agents, like they can answer email, particularly if you have templated your email in previous years. So I'm sure with like VC, like there's a standard response to incoming founders, right? Like you don't even have to like do that. And it's funny because a couple of months ago, I met with Jason Kalkanis, and he was saying they get all these applications in every year, and now they're down to 2 minutes per decision, right? If they're actually going to talk to that founder. But he's trying to get that down to 15 seconds with AI.
That's incredible.
Does that include due diligence as well? Or is it maybe that's just like the first?
No, that's the first step to like see if his team actually wants to meet with the founder, right?
Wow.
I mean, I think VC probably will be the last area where AI doesn't take over because human decision is so important.
You're totally objective here in this estimation, right?
Totally objective.
Same thing for podcast hosts, I hear.
But it's true, right? I mean, I think once you get past like what problem are they solving? Is it like a real problem? Is it a crazy idea? Is it actually needed in the market? Do you have the expertise in-house to help this founder like go to the next level? That's an important part. Those are things that AI could help discover for you. But you still need a collective group to get together and say, this is the deal that we are like hedging our bet, being this is the number one company.
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, I mean, off that too, to agree, I definitely think like when you get in a data room now, there are companies that you can synthesize you've been in the crazy data rooms when they just kind of dump everything at you and you open up this data room with 1,000 files and you're just like, I have 12 other companies to look at. Like, yeah, this is going to consume half of my day. But there are, companies, AI companies right now where you can take that data and like synthesize that all down and get actionable insights on like just what you're looking for. So I definitely think like from an investing perspective, yeah, I hear what you're saying. And maybe that's, what's even going to help Jason get to that 15 and then more. Right.
Well, I know that there's other companies that are trying to take a similar crack at that, like Kayvon, for example, and what they're doing with not SignalFire, SignalRank. I always confuse the two, but being able to pick the winners is helpful in an automated perspective, because then you can just focus on pull versus push, and then you get like killer deal flow and inbound, and then it's just running it through that model. But like, zooming out a little bit, I'm really curious what both of you think, Mercedes and Michael, about the human element. Like, what companies have you seen in the last 3 to 6 months that you're like, oh wow, this is the next OpenAI, which now has like 800 million weekly followers or users? So has there been any companies recently where you're really jazzed on?
There's one company and they didn't make it.
It didn't pass the model. Man, you guys are strict.
I mean, so it's a little bit sci-fi, but I think this is our future, and it's having a humanoid living with you. And this gentleman had created a humanoid that had the strength test to essentially walk around with like a pot of hot water to be able to like load shingles to like go up on your roof and like repair your roof, right? Like the strength capability, but also had the context. You could sit there and say like, hey, I'm thirsty. And it's like, oh, would you want me to bring you a water? Yeah. Well, why, yes. I mean, like I can have
no
like,
problem.
I can have hot tea made for me whenever I want. Like that's really attractive. But if you have a family, you know, like cutting vegetables, I don't want to cut another vegetable again in my life. Like I am so done.
It's kind of soothing. I guess I understand.
But I mean, I don't like to cook. So anything to do with cooking, I'd love to have someone to help me with that. You know, I have a dog that tracks in stuff and, you know, eats things. So to have someone that can actually hoover things really well, like every day, there's like some huge practical applications. And then I don't like to go to my neighbor's house because she's a little bit dirty. So
AI cannot.
Yeah, I don't know if AI is going to help that one.
I can't solve it.
You heard it here.
Yeah.
My humanoid could go to my neighbor and clean her house, and we could like share it as a resource, like the Uber of humanoids on the street.
Wow. Okay.
Because it's not like you have to repair your sprinklers every week.
Yeah.
But like when your sprinkler goes bad, like why not ask someone if you can use their humanoid? Think about the sharing economy. Like there's some interesting sharing. Like the average drill is only used like 10 minutes in a lifetime.
Wow.
So
That's a fun fact.
Like if someone on my street and like the next door group or, you know, WhatsApp group was like, hey, I need like a drill or I need like this physical help. You know, I just be like, hey, you rent my humanoid.
Yeah.
Rent my
Does that qualify as rentmyhumanoid.com?
Are you excited, or are you guys like, oh, this is too far fetched for me?
No.
Am I on the like?
No, I think obviously that's where they want to take this technology to. Do I think we're there yet? I mean, I'm gonna poke hole. I don't think we're there yet. I think we're farther than you think from
You
that.
mean tech or
No, just from
adoption?
having a humanoid in your house. I mean, we were just talking about this earlier. I mean, there was a video, I think it was in Taiwan, of a humanoid robot like attacking the two engineers working on it. And that is, for me, that's terrifying, right? I mean, I'm not trying to be like the oh, everything's going to come down and crumble guy, but it's like, I want to make sure before, especially what you're alluding to, you're passing around your humanoid. Like, God forbid something goes astray and you gave it to your neighbor and then they light your neighbor's house on fire because they malfunctioned. Like, that's on you.
Or now maybe they're both lovers.
Well, yeah. That's also true.
Oh, wow. I hadn't thought that.
Yeah, I didn't think about that.
Mercedes, you
Well,
did
you were
mention
alluding
that-
to earlier.
you mentioned that there was an interesting scenario was one of your portfolio companies who developed feelings for an AI. Can we talk about?
No, they did not develop feelings. For AI.
No names.
I said that the AI, if you talk kinder to it, it responds better, right?
That makes so much more sense now.
So in this particular case, the engineer had gone and changed the code and it was behaving poorly. And they were like, well, what happened? And I was like, well, this one engineer went in and took out like all the please and the thank you terms. And it started behaving like a 5-year-old child, being a little bit nasty.
Sure. Back to the food element, is that technically deep tech, or let's peel back the onion a little bit at what you do at ATIL?
Yeah, so I mean, predominantly our investment thesis, right? We have like more of like a hardware component along with the software. That's predominantly in our portfolio. Do a lot of space tech. We also do a lot of healthcare as well, so pre-revenue and diagnostics and stuff of that nature. But right now, I mean, to talk about a company you're excited about, the ag tech space is something that kind of gets me excited, just because back in the day, well, long before I'm sitting in a seat like this, I was out in the fields digging holes and pulling weeds, and I grew up doing that.
Did that yesterday?
Yeah, right. So now seeing just how far robotics has come, and I guess your humanoid robot could do that as well. They could be out doing the lawn, but
well, I mean, robots right now are like single use, right?
Yeah.
We are using robots in factories to like move things, and I mean, even like going down to the RoboVac Hoover, like the circular thing, like that's such a single use thing, right? But we can go so much further. And so, like, why? I mean, particularly as we age, right? So healthcare is an interesting one. Like that's probably an area that AI isn't going to take over. I mean, it may be like tests and diagnostics and things like that. But I mean, in Japan, they'll talk to their robots like to get their pill dispenser, and they like see it as almost part of the family, because the elderly person has no one else to talk to. So why not talk to the robot? But I think that's where we're going, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like there's jobs that are really hard to fulfill right now, and they're caregiving jobs, right?
Especially in Japan, because they have such a kind of a lopsided age distribution, right?
But it's also very expensive. Like in the Bay Area alone, like some of these nursing home facilities are between about like $13,000 and $21,000 per month. And no matter like how wealthy you are, even if you were in that top 1%, the top 1% cannot afford those rates at some point.
It does feel like that it is not a sustainable kind of a space,
For sure.
And people are heavy. Like my dad's 6'3", and he takes like 3 caregivers to pick up. And like the cost alone for him is it's been astronomical for me personally, and as well as him. But like this is something I'm living, and I'm like, geez, if I had a humanoid,
we got to get her a humanoid.
put Dad in the shower and just bathe him.
That's not real.
But I mean, instead, it's like 3 ladies that like he makes comments to.
Your dad's like, actually, I'm cool with the original setup.
yeah. Tell my daughter I do not want this thing in my house.
That's a pretty cool platform, or I would say a company.
You could keep people at home longer.
Yeah.
Right. And you can have a humanoid maybe like watch over them. But to your point, you're like, oh, like maybe they'll attack. Well, maybe they will. Right. But we also thought that about Uber drivers.
A little too cavalier there.
Slight maybe. Like, you're brushing over that as if that's okay.
But we thought about that about Uber drivers, right? Do you even hesitate to get into Uber now?
I mean, I think that goes back into autonomy with Waymo. I think Waymo is amazing for women late night for sure if they're by themselves. Like as a guy, yes, but I was getting in taxis, not worrying like my whole life. Like I'm not.
Michael's also a judo champion.
But like, no, I'm never worried about getting in. But yes, I have 2 sisters. Like, would I worry about that? Yes. Did I walk my sisters home at night when I lived in Boston with them? For sure. But like, I think now, say I'm, on a date or something, and I would rather order, my date a Waymo home, because it's like, okay, here you go. Like you can go home by yourself in this car. And I mean, I think that's on the rise more than anything. And I think whoever wins that race, that's going to be the next way to run, because Waymo, I mean, Google just came out with their earnings. I mean, 2 years ago, they were doing 10,000 rides a week. Now they're doing 200,000 rides a week. That is a crazy growth rate in 2 years. And that's only going to, I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm a big Waymo guy. Like I love taking Waymos. It's easy. And I think we both work in a space where our conversations, like you can't talk about things out in public, or you can't talk about certain things around different people. And I can hop on a Waymo and have any conversation I want. And like,
yeah, I don't know whether I trust that.
No,
no, I don't. I think it's a little bit weird.
Do you?
I mean, like, not the. I would. I'm not going to talk about it in a car. Not a car that I don't own. I'm just not.
You never know if you're being recorded, or
I guess
you never know when you're being recorded, or when the system goes a little bit faulty in that. Or like where those conversations end up. Maybe the AI determines, hey, it's okay to like record because I'm doing this for safety purposes, right? Like some type of logic, and then you're talking about like an IPO or something, and then you get screwed.
Yeah. The Waymo is like,
what about your
automatically locked? Like, you ain't going nope.
well, on that point, though, what about your humanoid? You're not going to be able to talk about anything in your house. What if it's recording your conversations?
I'll figure something out. I mean, that will be in
fashion baseball. Actually, speaking of the humanoid thing, specifically as it relates to Tesla, because I think they're kind of like vertically integrated in a lot of capacities where, you know, you probably saw, it was like yesterday or the day before, the Tesla robot was dancing, and it was like so elegant. It was like very impressive. You know, and I'm thinking if you know, they say that there's going to be like 100 million robots manufactured in the next year or so. So if Tesla can get 10% of that, and they're making, I mean, I don't know, maybe they're making like $10,000 if they're $20,000 units with 50% margins, you know, that's an extra $100 billion to their top line, just capturing 10% of the market. Not to mention the added benefits of these humanoid robots helping out on the assembly line too, you know.
I mean, Tesla's a interesting one to talk about. I mean, the brand reputation is suffering, right? But I think the stock is actually up over the past year. Like, I want to say that I bought it in at 108.
Yeah.
Good for you.
I haven't looked at it lately, but that's like 12 months ago, maybe less than that. I don't think the value is in the car anymore. I think it's within the solar tiles, the robots, and the battery backup, because there's so many places that still need battery backup, and we're running out of places for energy where the grid is like being maximized. But I think consumers are also getting pissed off about the cost of electricity.
Yeah.
In the Bay Area, the renewable energy charge, I think on the bill is like $280 for me. And I look at that and I'm like, yeah, I don't actually know it's renewable energy. I can't see it. I haven't visited the place. You know, how do I know they just didn't like, this isn't like an additional tariff? It feels like a tariff. But like when you start going like these routes of like really expensive resources to provide electricity, I'm like, I have full sun.
Yeah.
Like, why do I not have solar? In my case, I'm a renter, so that's why. But it's probably cheaper just to put my own solar capacity on and get it in the next like year or two if I stayed there.
Yeah. Or sell it back to the grid. I could see that being helpful too.
Yeah. I mean,
I have a friend who has a 10,000 square foot house and she only pays $20 a month.
Wow.
she uses solar.
And she has battery backup, right? So
5 windmills.
Yeah. 10,000 square foot house and 14 acres.
I mean, it is crazy.
Who's your friend?
I mean, but she has a pool, a hot tub, you know, this monstrosity of a house, and her electricity, she's like, oh, it's like $25 a month. And I'm like, what? And she's like, oh, we have it optimized for like solar and battery backup. So like she basically, and she sells back to the grid. So she has like all these storage options. And I'm like, well, why not? Right. That's such a better way to go economically than, you know, pay the electricity company or the gas company.
It does kind of, speaking of tariffs, it does kind of feel like a game of hide the cheese, right? Where there's a certain amount of elements that are deemed national security threats. So we need it like chips, for example, or parts in for certain automobiles or the automobile industry, or maybe for pharmaceuticals. Also, I think Trump just signed an executive order just yesterday that kind of is going to have a pretty big impact on how much U.S. is paying. Like, for example, there's an asthma drug that is $500 in the U.S. and it's $40 in the U.K. Or what's that one weight loss drug that's super popular? In fact, Jason Ozempic. It's 10 times more expensive here than it is in Europe.
Yeah.
So it just doesn't feel. It feels like and obviously the traditional pushback is like, well, the reason that it's so expensive is because we got to do all the development. And it's like, well, if those costs are being burdened by the U.S., maybe that should be distributed a little bit more evenly across the rest of the world. Where do you two fall in this?
Oh, I think I don't know if this even falls into the tariff category, frankly. So as someone who has been a part of socialist healthcare systems in the EU and the UK, they buy collectively. So they buy collectively from like Pfizer or whatever. It's like straight to the source. There is no middleman. There is no insurance. There is the doctor is there, but the doctor is not getting paid off of like any of these drugs. So it's a different deal as far as like supply chain. And I don't think like for anyone to compare that is fair because they don't quite understand how it works in other countries. So of course it is cheaper based off of collective bargaining because it's a government expenditure, which is always cheaper. And they're saying, hey, we're buying X number of units, essentially for the year is how that works. It's not like it is here.
But the US only represents 4% of the global population, and still we're shouldering like 80% of these drug costs. It just doesn't seem.
The Europeans are just better negotiators.
Not for long.
I think you're.
No,
I think you're
true.
forgetting that we have a middleman. I guess you just.
Yeah, we have a
about that.
middleman.
So we have the PBMs, and that's what realistically he's coming after and trying to figure out, is because the pharmacy benefit managers, it's almost like you're paying this, like, I guess, tariff or tax. You're paying this tax as it comes to the end user, and that's going to be the main focus, is figuring out, I guess, one, the value add there, two, why it costs so much to go through the stream, and kind of taking out that middleman. I think that's where the focus is going to come down on, and where a lot of the cost is coming into play.
America could do so much better on healthcare if they just got rid of the providers. In Europe, we still have private insurance, by the way.
Wasn't Mark Cuban trying to crack that nut
He's
a
currently
while back?
He's currently doing it.
Okay.
He's still doing it. Yeah.
Well, I'm sure the lobbyists are like at him with a pitchfork.
Oh, for sure. But it's Mark Cuban, and that's what he does. He disrupts. That's
So, I mean, how
why he's one
the
of my heroes.
US healthcare system has been built is to extract money from individuals, period. That's the reason that most individuals lose all their wealth within the last 2 years of their life.
Wow.
So the last 2 years, like, you're going to nursing homes that are like extortion and cost.
Sure.
And, maybe you last more than that. Like, I thought my dad would have died 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And like, he's still here and he's still costing a fortune.
Yeah.
And the extraction has happened at this point.
And that's frustrating, because then it puts extra burdens emotionally on folks. And, I think this was kind of interesting. We were talking a little bit about the national security piece. Benchmark, who is like famous for being one of the first folks in Uber, just like Jason, had just put 75 million into Manus AI, which is a Chinese company. Actually, they're based in the Caymans, and on paper. And then I also have employees in the US, Singapore, and China. So technically, they're not a Chinese company, but maybe this is going to be kind of like a proxy, or like how we look at the government's interaction with, hey, is it okay for an American VC to be on the same cap table for a Chinese company, a Chinese AI company? I mean, this kind of gets to be sticky territory, right?
I think if this happened prior to everything that's going on right now with the geopolitical tensions between us and China, that maybe it wouldn't have made such headlines. But I think right now we're kind of we're in a 90-day grievance period, but we don't know what's going to happen at the end of that, and tensions are quite high. So I think that's why it probably set off a lot of alarm bells, and people are feeling some way about it.
Yeah, things will change, right? And it could change by the decade, it could change by the year. Like, and we've seen this in the UK recently, right? So with Brexit, there was a period of time that it didn't make sense as a UK fund and a UK citizen to go invest into EU company, because there was a lot of red tape around it and a lot of cost involved. And then at some point in time, they were like, oh, this doesn't make like total sense. So
were you in the US when Brexit happened?
No.
Okay.
I was in the UK,
I see.
and Brexit kind of killed my fund.
Wow.
So, I mean, I have a lot of thoughts on this. And
Double click. Yeah.
I mean, some of what's going on in the US feels very similar to like what happened in the UK.
I've seen this movie before.
Yeah. I mean, like deja vu.
Yeah.
But I mean, here's the thing, like tariffs happen like every so often. I think people get over them. They figure out a way to use it within their business. They figure out a way to mark up their margins. And, just kind of like, I think a number of years ago, was it the double Dutch sandwich we were worried about within business? I think this was before Trump's first term, where US companies would put like their headquarters or something in Ireland and one other place, I can't remember. And they were using a tax benefit, right? Yeah. And so like he basically changed the taxation where everyone came back to the US, right? And they got rid of like that loophole. So I think
it was a nasty loophole though. I mean, we're losing $2 trillion a year, and China was, and Ireland was up either 20 or 50 billion for their GDP last year because of this IP loophole. They were like licensing it to.
But I mean, you have to look at what the incentive is. If the incentive in the US is to, go make more money because we're IPO type company, you have a fiduciary duty to your stockholder to like make those margins.
But the rules were screwed up. I mean,
yeah, but it doesn't matter. Like you're going to go find a way, right? You're going to find a way to produce it a little bit cheaper. You're going to find a way to extract as much margin and create as maximum profitability. And like, so we're kind of reversing some of that right now. And I think it's going to be a little messy, but, alternatively, I think there's a whole slew of companies that could go to Puerto Rico where it's like a 4% tax rate. And you just have to spend time in Puerto Rico.
Yeah, like Sam Bankman-Fried.
And it's been there for a while. So nothing's stopping people from going to Puerto Rico.
I'm not
except them.
I'm not blaming these companies for playing by the rules and leveraging the 80,000 plus pages of tax code. I'm saying that there was a lack of alignment within maybe the state and federal government and big business and what's actually right for the American people. So if like another really good example of these cruises, so it can be a cruise company with American employees picking up Americans and going through the Bahamas, but the company is actually based in like somewhere in like Central America, and then they're writing off all their expenses as like capex or operational expenditures. But like those taxes should be going back to the U.S. And I think this is like some of the things that Howard Lutnick and some of the rest of the cabinet is pushing forward to drive. I don't know, would you call it nationalism or just like maybe a return to American exceptionalism? How are we thinking about this?
I mean, look, I think obviously the way we're looking at tariffs is what everyone's talking about right now. And you can think of it from both sides. I think that, look, what President Trump's trying to do is, and I hope this is his motive, and I believe it is to cut down and to chip away at the $2 trillion a year in interest payments that we owe on the looming debt over us, which is in my opinion, one of the biggest problems we have right now. And like, look, I get it. This is, maybe there could have been a way more pragmatic way of doing things, but
a little chaotic.
He's a chaotic guy. But on the contrary to even that point, right? Like we've never seen, or it's been decades since something has disrupted like this in trade policy. So I think that yes, there had to be kind of this crazy junction of swings back and forth. But if at the end of the day, and when the dust settles, if we can make 20 to 30 positive deals out of this, like I don't think people understand how great that will be for years to come for America. Yeah. And look, maybe it puts bad taste in some people's mouth. Some people don't agree with it, but bipartisan agreement should be, we need to deal with this budget deficit.
It's existential.
Yeah.
You know what kind of reminds me of? It's like they say, when you are healthy, you've got a million problems. When you're sick, you have one problem. This feels like the same thing, but from a financial perspective.
For sure.
I think we have a lot to do on the budget. I don't think there's anyone that I've talked to that agrees that the government shouldn't be audited. Like we need to audit the government to know like what's going on, and that should be like something that we do routinely. But I also feel like every 5 years we should relook at policy and say, you know what, this was made with a really good intention, but it had like such severe negative consequences. So we should maybe rethink this or get rid of it. Mm-hmm. And everything should be up for renewal. So maybe like, you know, these like taxes, like what was the telephone tax that we had for the longest time? The Spanish-American War?
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Let's go bring it into history.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that was like
go back
Louisiana purchase, the greatest purchase.
Yeah.
But it came off our telephone bills like 20 years ago. That's crazy. Like, why are we continuing to pay that tax? And like, where is it going? And like, does that even make sense? Like, no, it didn't make sense. And I think a lot of people looked at that every month when they received their like cell phone bill or whatever bill it was and said like, I don't need the Spanish-American War tax on my telecom.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's a true thing, right? And like where is that money going? Like we should audit just like we do in a company, just like we should do on our own like personal accounting measures.
Do every year.
We should do every year. And the same with like universities. Like there's some really weird things going on in the university system that have that were created to get money flowing into a university, and now the side effect is that state parents and state students who have paid into like the California system, they're not getting into California schools because they're taking such a high amount internationally because those people pay more.
For sure.
Right? It's state funded. So why should we accept like such a huge percentage of international students?
It had, I think, good intentions initially. It's like, well, education's important, so let's have the government partially subsidize that, so more people can educate themselves. However, there was no backstop for these educational institutions to not charge more. So it's like, yeah, they got more money from the government, but then they just passed on those charges to the students, which kind of like, that just made these universities richer. When you mentioned, Mercedes, that there was some funny business happening in these universities, how deep does that funny business go? Are you talking about like foreign actors infiltrating?
No, I mean, I just think like, when you have 25% being international students, out of the population, that's a huge budgetary amount when they're paying like 3 times the amount that a California resident would.
Yeah.
And so like, where's the incentive? The incentive is like, oh, let's not accept our like California locals who actually paid the tax dollars for the past 20 years. And let's just only accept, the international student. And I don't think that's necessarily fair. And then you look at like the cost of like the athletics, like that's a whole different conversation. But what really bothers me is the cost for the degree and the outcome of the degree. So when we talk about the budget spiral and like what's going on with like all these loans in the university area, those kids never had a chance. Yeah. Right? Like when you spend, $30,000-$40,000 a year to get an English degree, and the average salary for the English degree on the university paper is $40,000. Like, why would you do that? But they don't think about that because they're adolescents. And then there's a lot of people fiscally that, the parents aren't teaching their kids to see like, what is your salary of this degree you're thinking of compared to the amount of debt that you're going to create.
So what does education look like in the future? Or I guess maybe a better question is like, what should students be studying right now?
I mean, to go off that point, what is it? Andrel, they just came out saying that they'll take kids right out of high school and pay them I think it's like $50,000 a year to work for them. Wow. And it's almost like getting an education in business, right? And it's like, or in engineering or whatever avenue you're going to go to. I think now more than ever, kids can, especially with what we were talking about earlier with AI and just how much you can do yourself. I don't know. I mean, you have to sit back and really think about it. It's like you have to go to college with such a strategic outcome of what you want to do when you get out now more than ever, because one, it's going to be so expensive, but two, I think the trades and all that should also be top of mind for some of these kids coming out of high school. I think in high school itself, and there's no way they do this, as you get to like junior, senior year, there should be very like distinct classes where they're kind of not grooming you to pick where to go, but just kind of laying out the facts for you and being very transparent. Hey, if you go get an English degree, you're going to make $45,000 a year. Probably shouldn't go to USC and be in $200,000 in debt because it's not going to matter. Right. So it's like, I think that having that education, right, when kids are 17 and 18 and trying to figure out what they want to do, I think that's the paramount issue is kind of is drawing down and starting right at the root. Right. And then as they grow, then figure that out. I mean, kids right now, I would say, I don't know. I mean, I went to college because I thought that was the right thing to do. And it's like, looking back on it, I think there's kids that don't even need to go to college.
I agree with a lot of that. So in the UK, you are, or basically all Europe, you are wedged at 16 to like where you will go. Now, the problem with that is like if you flunk out of college, you can't go back to the same one. You're kind of like scarred for life. So, but the US, what is beautiful about the culture is it's really the American dream. Like this concept of you can fail and like recreate yourself and do something else again and be successful is something that's really important in American culture. And I think that's something that none of the studies really account for, right? What is that creativity? And I don't know that I think we have creativity in our generation. I don't know that the kids growing up right now have creativity because they're not thinking, right?
Do you think that's trust? They're not thinking, full stop.
I don't think they really think that much. Like they've never been lost.
Yeah.
Like,
Do you think it's trust in the system to give them another shot, another bite at the apple? Or is it more like trust in themselves to like, hey, if I screw this up, that's okay. I'll just try again and figure it out.
I think it's both. I mean, Americans are the most egotistical group in the world. Like if you,
because we're the best. Kidding.
It's true, right? So, but if you look at that, like ego takes you really far. You can say, "Hey, I failed. I can like do it again," and you're not like scarred for life. A European, like when they fail at their first startup, they have a really hard time like getting back on the horse and doing it again. And it's a very small segment that accepts failure and can sit there and like just rise above. And so when we talk about outcomes and success and how it relates to AI, I think to be really successful with AI, you have to be super creative. And you just have to have still the willingness to figure something out. You have to be a problem solver because it's not going to have all the answers and you're going to have to go find your own stuff to augment it. But if you've grown up in a world where you haven't ever had to create and solve your own problems,
Adversity.
you're going to have a problem.
To have to overcome.
Yeah, I think double click on that. Like having resilience and being someone who can pick themselves up after falling down. I don't know if necessarily that has anything to do with schooling per se. I think that more so has to do with how you, one, were raised, two, you conduct yourself, three, your habits, and four, like, I guess your perseverance and your growth. I guess, and again, I'm someone who, I understand what you're saying about the generation, below us and whatnot, but I've seen both sides of it and managing people, and I've seen, the kid who is in the younger generation that is an absolute killer.
Oh yeah.
And he would I would, beat on him because that's what happened to me when I was younger, like working in finance. I mean, we could usually say a lot worse things than we can say now. And it's like, but it made me who I am today and gave me the resilience I have and like kind of the harder shell to pick yourself up. Right. So I think to put it's tough because I know what you're saying, but to blanket that whole generation would be tough because there are individuals in that generation that
no, I agree.
They are very resilient, very tough, and they want it really bad.
I just think it's fewer than like the
For
generations that exist now.
Right? Let's talk more about that though, because you both get to see a ton of great founders and probably a ton of okay founders. And when you look at, obviously, resilience is an important skill set, or I should say a character trait. What are the other traits that make for a good founder?
Knowing their numbers.
Yeah.
Finance.
Yeah.
Right? Like you just have to focus on numbers. If you don't know your numbers, you don't know your business. So it could be like the numbers between like how many customers you have, like your growth rate, your profitability, your lack of cash flow, how much you have till the end.
Yeah.
If you don't think about these things every day and you don't live your life by them, then it's really hard to run a successful company.
Yeah. You hear that? Know your numbers. This is good. This is really good feedback, actually.
Yeah, I definitely agree with her on all those points. Absolutely.
I don't know.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then I don't know, personally, I got taught this at a young age from a great boss. It's like the no a-holes rule. So I'm a person who, when I'm going to start a conversation, I love to go out, have a lunch with them or have a coffee. And that is paramount before closing on anything and funding anything. Because you can learn a lot from someone. And I ask them questions like, what are your routines? What do you like to do for fun? What are your hobbies? what have you read lately, and different things like that. You can figure out who a person is rather quickly just on asking them pointed questions about their hobbies, what they do, who they hang out with, you know.
That seems kind of surface level, right? Like, of course, it's easy for somebody to act cool when everything is going well, but what if you put them under pressure? What if you take them to a party or social situation where they don't have that area of expertise or they don't know anybody? You get to kind of see how they'd function outside of that comfort zone. Do either of you practice anything like this before you write a check?
I can't say I've partied with too many of my founders, but I think I'd push back a little, because yes, that's surface level per se, but as just being like, half our job is to read people, and also the numbers in the sector and whatnot. But I'd say you can tell quite a bit from, and one of my first jobs when I was an analyst, it was a gruesome interview process. You would meet with 14 people in like 6 hours, and then after that, and our boss was the absolute man, and he would say the final test is you have to go to lunch, and he would come around. We were in a big analyst pit. You would pick a couple analysts and say, all right, go to lunch with him, and you can find out a lot from a person from having a meal with them.
Yes.
And I guess that's why I push back a bit on saying like, oh, it's surface level. It's not too service. Like, if I'm sitting with you for an hour and I'm going to ask some very intrusive questions, like, you see what's going on and you can tell. And I guess something for me personally, like I always ask, is when I say, what are your habits? Like, if someone's like, oh, I get up at 9 and head to the office and like come back and watch Netflix and go to bed. Yeah. It's like, okay, like, where's your workout in there? Like, where's your learning in there? Where's like do you go for a nature walk? Because that's where you get your creative thoughts. I mean, those are things where like, that's our job, is to dig in and personally double click on things. We may not say it to them while we're sitting at lunch, but like, that's what we're thinking. So I guess that's why it's more than you'd think.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess with the accelerator model, you get to know them for 3 months, right? Like, do they turn stuff in on time? Are they growing? Have they learned? And so after
Can we talk more about that? Because I think what you and Adeo and team are building at Founders Institute, it's pretty brilliant, because you're helping folks become founders, and then you're helping a different cohort become investors, and then you get to bring them together. Where did this idea come from? Help us understand some of the best practices, and maybe how can folks get involved?
Well, I mean, obviously Founder Institute was born out of the need of entrepreneurs kind of needed a way to figure out how to launch successfully. And so that was the blueprint for that, right? Take them through training of what it's like to be a founder, how to be a founder, how to be successful. The program absolutely works. And then, after 9,000 basically companies become successful, they're all like, hey, we need funding. Yeah. And then at that point,
let's build that.
Well, I mean, I think there is an element to that. No, but I think, you see a lot of those companies, they go to like IPO, they have successful exits. And then you have founders that are like, hey, I have like a slew of money, but I don't want to be a founder again, right? Like, they're like, I think a VC job seems a little bit more appealing. So
is it cushy to be a VC?
I mean, no comment. So yeah, they start to invest like their own money, and they go and they invest in angels, and like, next thing you know, they realize like, hey, I'm not a great angel investor, or why don't I help like deploy other people's money, right, into like a particular area. So VC Lab was born out of the need for emerging managers, the need for funding from a founder perspective, but just I think a lot of angels in the area are ready to go to that next level. Sure. And they're like, hey, let me start a small fund. And I want to start a fund on things that are important to me. So some of my favorite fund thesis is there's a woman whose husband died of ALS. She's a Stanford researcher. Her brother is also a Stanford researcher. And she was like, I want to create a fund to study essentially like brain diseases and cures for brain diseases. And so she's like super invested, just like the same problem for an entrepreneur. Like, really successful founders have a problem that they're trying to solve oftentimes.
And they know their why. If the why is strong, then the how becomes easy.
So like she did a fund for that. There was another one that lived kind of in that Aaron Brockovich region of water, and she was actually a lawyer, and she was just like, I could do these deals and look for water treatments and water cures to clean the water. And like, again, like, why would you not give money to a fund that is doing that? Right? I mean,
it also has national security undertones too. Right?
Yeah. I mean, it's such a, when I look at things that I like in kind of like my past investing, water is one of them, strangely. Anything to do with like reducing electricity cost or getting off grid in a really powerful way is really important to me. But it's utilities. It's frankly like, what are the 5 things that we use? Telecom actually was another one. So when like Zoom went through the roof, like that was super exciting. I wasn't like it was a different type of person.
That's great.
I wasn't an investor in Zoom, other than like a stock market type play. But I mean, it's still, right? Like these are things I use every day. And there's things that are nice to have, but there's actual needs that we need solved. And there's things that we can do in a better way, right? Yeah. Transportation, telecom, all these things.
All the ancillary businesses around that, like infrastructure. We didn't get a chance to talk too much about the tokenization, but this was such a fun conversation with you both. Just to touch on it real briefly, my understanding of tokenization is it's essentially measuring the compute for an outcome. So for like generative AI, for example, what's interesting, and in fact, I just learned this last week when we had the chairman of Chooch on, Chooch AI, which is a computer vision company. It's, there was object detection and all sorts of really kind of pretty cool stuff, but now they're layering on natural language. So you can like talk to the model and say, find me all the cracks in the solar panel, for example. And that utility, or I guess that function, requires a certain amount of tokens. And like certain tokens or certain models are more token heavy than others. In fact, just this morning, I use ChatGPT and a couple of these other models, but I'm like, what's the difference between O3 and or O4 or 4.5 and what I essentially learned from another great podcast called AI Daily Brief. It's all your AI news in like 5 minutes, which is kind of like a fun thing. Is that O4 is like your workhorse. So for like the majority of the stuff, and then 4.5 would be when it needs a little bit more sophisticated, deeper reasoning, and then O3 is like for some of like the coding and like some of the kind of more technically challenging prompts. But I mean, what kind of models are you using? Are you seeing any differences in this space?
Oh, I'm playing around with everything right now.
Yeah,
right. Things that I download and install on like my own hardware.
You're running some models locally.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
okay, do tell. Are you using Hugging Face?
I have used Hugging Face in the past. Yeah, I mean, I think you just have to play with each one of them, right? So there's some that are really, really good for images. So like, I don't know if you look at Deo's like feed, he's like having a ton of fun with like images and creating like various things. Like he created, he told the model to, draw pictures of him as like a child. And
wow.
He
That's
said,
crazy.
And also as him older, and he's like, geez, I saw like, my entire life before me, like from like looking like my dad to like, being, it had photos of him holding himself as a baby.
That's so meta. That's pretty cool though.
It was just really funny. Right?
It sounds like par for the course for Deo.
Yeah. I mean,
Deo's a fascinating guy. He must be pretty fun to work with.
Yeah. So, I mean, his sense of humor is just, it's off the charts once he starts playing with these things.
And college roommate with Elon too, which is kind of crazy. Local guy.
Yeah, I'm ChatGPT guy like you, man. Yeah, I'm not writing code. Definitely, I mean, using that, use Notion, and and that's probably like the brevity of where I'm at with that.
That space is changing though, right? So like, for example, Lovable now has an integration with something base, Superbase. So like if we look at a web or mobile product, you've got the interface and then you've got the backend, the database, and sometimes like Stripe that processes things in between. Well, Lovable is they're from Stockholm. They're worth about 10 billion, and they're essentially design that is code ready. So the code adapts to that, and then so like the native integration with Superbase, like the backend infrastructure, makes it so maybe you don't have to be so technical to create these products in moving forward. In fact, Eric Schmidt of Google says that, and I think he said like 6 to 12 months, 90+% of codes can be AI generated.
Replit.
Yeah.
Replit is amazing. So, I mean,
can you explain further?
So it's basically, you can just write what you need for code, and you can say like, hey, I need a presentation maker, and you can give it specific directions on like what you think the presentation should like work for your company, and like according to like your company mission and values. And then you sit there and say like, hey, I need this like done, and it'll create all the bullet points. But Replit is like, you can create an app within 2 hours, right? And everyone I know is kind of playing with this. Yeah. Like they'll go and create wellness apps and like things to help them out on a daily basis, extract information, pull information, and put it back. Now it's a little bit janky sometimes, but I mean, we're all learning, right? If you're not a coder, it's going to take you probably a little bit more time, but it's really geared for someone who's never coded in their life. There's other ones out there that, you know, it's basically just an app builder. Yeah. Like, you know,
the
build an app in an hour.
Wow. The space does seem to be shrinking though. Like for those who are artistically aware and technically savvy, you know, or maybe not so technically savvy, that's, you know, that seems to be shrinking, right?
Well, I think things are going to change. Like everyone knows OpenAI, but there's a ton of LLMs now, right? And so when you're building your company using something like AirOps, so they have connections with all the LLMs. And as you know, like certain upgrades aren't that great in the LLM world. So you might go, oh, like I was using ChatGPT, but now I go use Claude, right? Because it's producing better content at this like point in time. Or maybe I go somewhere else. But AirOps is perfect for that. So you're not stuck and embedded into like just one, because you don't want to be stuck in one.
Yeah.
Like there's always something new around the corner.
Sure. Yeah. And, you know, I love that you say that. So we always want to make sure to have the zombie community be valuable to our distinguished guests. So maybe is there a website that you'd like to plug, or how can folks get in touch with you? You might be on this platform called LinkedIn. I don't know.
You can reach me on LinkedIn. I mean, things that we've talked about, if you're interested in starting a startup, you don't know how, Founder Institute is a perfect way to go. You know, that community is very close to me for a lot of reasons. I would say if you're interested in starting a VC, go to VC Lab. If you need to get funded, please don't come to me.
Mercedes will write you a check on the spot.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, how should founders, if they did want to,
they can reach out to me on LinkedIn.
Okay.
It's a lot of noise for me, right? So
be the signal, not the noise, if you're looking for capital. Right?
Things that I am interested in is talking with founders who have done really well in like starting a company in the past year. So like,
or have community. Like you mentioned
community.
The importance of community building on top of product and customers, right?
And that have done it with a very small number of employees. Because I'm so curious, like, how did that happen, right? Like, what are you using? What kind of tech are you using? Like, what was the viral component? So I'm always happy to talk to like founders who are doing high growth rates, little employees.
Very cool. Very cool. And Michael, what about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, reach me on LinkedIn, Michael Orlando, and at atelventures.com. You can look at our site, and you know, we invest in everything from Series A and above. We're industry agnostic, so would love to chat.
Get some of that deep tech action going.
Okay, whatever. We're industry agnostic, so I'm happy to chat about anything and everything.
All right. Well, great. Thank you so much. It was great having both of you for more of the best brains. Check out siliconzombies.com. Also want to do a shout out to our friends at Codex for building web and mobile products. And of course, our friends at Spread. So gospread.co. Shout out to our buddy Eddie who gave us this beautiful place today at 70 Commission. So thanks so much, everybody. And we'll see you next week. Cheers.
See you guys.
Awesome. Thank you. That was great.
I am lost.